Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Huddle on Tuesdays, where typically my co-host Tara and I talk about everything to do with relationships and communication, but it's just me with my wonderful, delightful guest and good friend, Laura West, today. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Always love to be in this community.
Yes. Well, we are going to talk about what is calling you forth today. Before we get started, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Laura. For those who aren't familiar, she is a multiple time guest on the Daily Huddle, so some of you might recognize her. But Laura knows that when you're aligned with your joy, your purpose, and your signature creative brilliance, success is inevitable. She's helped thousands of entrepreneurs and professionals unlock their soul work, creativity, and leadership presence. She's the CEO of the Center for Joyful Business, author of the upcoming book called Dream Weaving, and is the host of the Joyful Business podcast. She helps coaches, healers, and purpose-driven entrepreneurs shift the blocks they have so that they can claim their creative leadership and share their soul work in a bigger way, all while making a positive difference. And that is what we are going to talk about today. So welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. So this came about from a conversation that we had, what is calling you forth? Partly due to what's going on in the world, just in the US, having come off of another election. But it was more about you talk a lot about joy and how to express your joy and how to do that even with your work. And part for me, part of it is sometimes like, well, just go be more joyful. Why don't you just go do that passion thing? And then, the money will come. And it's like, for me, sometimes that doesn't align. Like it needs to be more like, first of all, I need to pay the bills and, all of that. But when you started talking about what is calling you forth, that really drew me in. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that means to you, what's calling you forth, and then we can dive into sort of the broader, how do we do that? Because
Mhm.
I think the issue is like, or the bottom line is that when we get connected to our values, that's when the real work starts to like thrive and blossom and all of that stuff. So, talk to us a little bit about what is calling you forth.
Calling forth. Well, yeah, where to start from. And so to me, it is listening to, it's a lot of listening, and the calling forth sounds so much about action, but it's that first step is like listening, that deep listening. And that deep listening to the whispers for what's gently tugging at your heart or your soul, saying, pay attention to me. Or maybe
Mhm.
it's listening to the wake up calls, the 2x4s, the wake up calls, the health scare or the divorce or the empty nest or the election or whatever things are going on in your world that are having you feel a lot. And so our feelings and our emotions are so key to this, because they are they guide us. They're like a emotional weather map to tell us, really an emotional treasure map, um,
Mhm.
to tell us to pay attention somewhere, and that when we pay attention, that's where we start seeing what's calling us forth. When we pay attention to the compass of joy, passion, creativity in your heart, your heartstrings, what's stirring your heart. It's like those are things that have you either that you're feeling really alive and
Mhm.
it's like, okay, there's energy calling you forth, or maybe it's the opposite, like there's kind of a deadening, um, and you feel stuck in that area. So there's lots of places to drop in with that. But I think there's another question that you're bringing up is like, well, why do I want to give time and energy to this? There's so much going
Yeah, can I
on.
go a little deep and personal with you right now? That's what I'm feeling
Sure.
called forth with you. Well, I'm curious, what is calling you forth?
Mm. Well, as you know, I in September I took a 3-week sabbatical and I walked the Camino, part of the Camino Frances, and which is a pilgrimage path. There's many different paths, but the one I took was in northern Spain, and you end up at the Cathedral de Santiago. And but it's really about the pilgrimage, the walk. And so that was calling me forth. I was celebrating a big birthday, and I wanted to celebrate in a different way that took me out of my environment and um, I had a little bit of a romanticized version of what that was going to be like. Like I thought I was going to be all reflective while I walk and get all these downloads. And really what it did is had to help me be really present, just present to the walking, present to my body. But what I did get through that was like what came through was places in my life that were tugging at me, that were calling me forth to change, pay more attention to my health, that my team that's supporting my business, something needed to change. My relationship needed to change, my primary partner relationship. There were certain things that were like, and something in my business, there's a lot of change afoot, literally. And so, but there was that time that the answers didn't come, but it was like these whispers of like, okay, when I'm really aligned with my values, when I get really still, really clear, go on a Camino walk or go down to the beach and get in nature, it's like allowing those whispers to be heard.
Hmm. Well, I love what you're saying because really, I mean, if we're not present, we really can't hear anything or be with what is around us.
And it's so busy.
Um,
We're so busy. We've got, our stress, our worries, our things to do. And so it's easy to just keep putting those whispers on the back burner,
mhm,
or the bigger wake up calls. It's like, well, I just have to deal with my divorce, or I just have to deal with a health crisis, in my family, or there's so many things that are calling us, but it's like listening to that, what's underneath, giving ourselves that time and space,
mhm.
um, makes all the
What's
difference.
what do you think the cost is or the expense of not listening to what is calling us forth? Like, and let me say a little bit more about why I'm saying that. Like, I think what's been calling me forth is a healing journey with like my past and things like that, like just things that keep coming up, patterns I keep repeating, things like that. And so I really feel like that's something I need to pay attention to. So I know what the cost of not doing that is. It's the same old,
Mhm.
right? And if I'm wanting something different, then I've got to change what I'm doing. And I guess what I'm getting at is why would somebody go on this journey of being called forth? Because it's not an easy one, at least not in my experience.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think for people who have a yearning for their life to be living their life with their values, living
Mhm.
life in alignment, then it's like the price becomes that your soul is not being listened to. It's not being honored, or your body's not being honored, or your heart's not being honored. And when that happens, it creates a dissonance and it shows up with health issues. It shows up with mental, emotional issues, and it leaks out into our lives, right? It
Right,
leaks out that we're not expressing ourselves fully with our truth, with our own truth, with our own voice. And so it starts leaking out with symptoms of being irritated, being frustrated, feeling depressed, feeling super sad, not able to get out of a grief process, things like that. So that suppressing it's not just joy, right? Because there's joy, sometimes it's joy, but sometimes like the health journey, an emotional journey like you're talking about is not necessarily joy in the moment, but it will eventually expand your range of joy. I think that's
hmm.
what we're all trying to go.
So is this your focus right now? Like when clients come to you and is this what you're kind of listening for, looking for, or
Yeah,
is, it is? Tell me more
absolutely.
about that, about, yeah, like, because it's a time and the way we talked about it, it's like a time and place in our world right now, what we're going through.
It is. It is. I've been a business coach for almost 25 years, and there is a huge shift going on with my clients, and I'm noticing where they're just too exhausted to think about the next marketing strategy. And if that marketing strategy doesn't have heart and soul in it, they just won't do it. They can't do it. They just can't. They don't even want to bother. But yet they need to make money and they want to make a change and they want to do good in the world. And I think that we are in this unique, whatever you want to call it, pressure cooker, this unique time in our world where after the pandemic and then all the things that are have us worried about in the world, that it's having us say, what do I really, really want? Because it's more than the car and the house and the boat and be able to go on great trips. We love all those things, right? But there's something deeper that our soul is just really just yearning for. And so what I'm noticing that with my clients where they are it's like they're just exhausted beyond a burnout. Ever since COVID, it just flipped everything around, and we are, it's just impacted so many things that never gone back. And then now we're seeing all that intensify. And it's like they're finally, I don't know, maybe everybody's just finally calling uncle, and saying something's got to change, right? Something needs to be different. And so
So
they're
how do
building.
you take them through that process? Like how, I mean, how does just a normal person who's, yeah, burned out, tired, exhausted, whether they've got a business or they're in a job, like what do they do with that? How do they, I mean, it sounds great, but like I still have to go to
Right.
my job and take care of my kids and
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think in the past, there's been kind of this entrepreneurial version of it that is like, well, just listen to your heart, follow your bliss, take the leap, quit your job, get divorced, do
yes,
whatever,
yes,
and go and do that. And, what we find is that's not always sustainable, or it
right.
hijacks our nervous system. I know for me, that was what I was raised in as far as, being in business for the last 25 years. And it never really felt aligned to my heart or my nervous system. Like my nervous system would get so hijacked and be like, I'm just supposed to leap in and the net will follow and it'll appear. And yeah, and it doesn't always happen like that, right? And so I've really come to this place where it's more about acknowledging the call, even if you don't know exactly what it is, and then looking, I take my clients and I go through this, I'm going through it myself again because it is reiterative at different points in your life, where you listen, like what are those whispers? Where is the anger? Where are the moments of joy? Um, where do you need to give yourself permission to do something that may not even make sense, right? But that there is some truth inside you where it's aligned. Like I'm getting ready to create I'm thinking of my client, thinking of me. We're in this group where we're all creating a project that is a creative passion project that may be directly related to their business or it may not. And so I have a client who is just starting her executive coaching business again, and she's using Strengths Finders, but she has this passion project of putting these affirmations on homemade mugs, handmade mugs, not homemade, handmade. And she loves handmade mugs. She collects them all over the world and she wants to put these affirmations on it. And it can seem like, what are you doing? You need to do all the things with your business. No, she's doing the things with her business, but she's giving herself permission, which is huge, to do this creative project that might seem like, why are you spending your time in this program doing this? But what I know is that expression and that creating something there's something on the other side for her. There's something there that's going to lead her to more of that fuller expression, where she's wanting, that's calling her forth. It's like that's part of the path. It's like take the next step, and then you'll see what the next step is after that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
So is that like, because we talked about this too, like I have woodworking, right? And I love going in my basement and playing in my workshop. And some of it's for people, furniture, et cetera, and some of it's for nothing. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Like what am I doing? Or I'll get started on this side project that I've got all these other things to do, but I'm like, I made a little box to pull my trash bags out of because I just really wanted a dispenser for my trash bags. I mean, I was like, what am I doing? I have so
Yeah.
many other things to be
Sometimes you're
doing.
doing it just because it makes you feel good, right? And to me, that's like that's priceless, right? If it makes you feel good, then you're going to show up with a little more pep in your step, right? You'll show up in a little more positive way because we've actually created something
Mhm.
that was an expression, of ourselves.
Yeah, and I get you're right, it does. And I always say like it gives me the freedom. Like my brain does need a break, it needs a break from all the thinking and all the things. But is that like, but sometimes I still feel like it's not enough, right?
Mhm.
I felt really lit up when I was in business and I was making money from the things that I was creating because I love to do that. Part of creating and growing a business is creative, right? And I love doing that part. So that's missing, right? But like, is that enough just to keep doing those little things, or do you help people, or do we need to be like taking it in a direction and focusing on like, oh, what is that giving back to me and growing, or is it just a natural process to just engage with?
So I think it's like a yes and, right?
Okay.
So I think sometimes there's different seasons in your life, right? And there's times where you're in a season of your life where going down to the basement and doing something with wood just is the thing that you need to do. That is enough creative expression for now. But again, if you're making time for that deep listening, sometimes that deep listening is going to say, you know, there's something more. For some
Hmm.
people, that's enough, is to have this creative hobby, this expression. It doesn't have to become a business or a part-time gig or something like that. Again, that deep listening is going to help us say, you know what, I want to make a difference, or I want to make money, or I want to bring this beauty out into the world. And so that's part of that deep listening of what's calling you forth now, because it's not a one-time thing. It's, okay, what's calling you forth now, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's such a good point because I do think that we can get stuck. I know I do. I'll get stuck in like, oh, I have to do this, or I have to be creating something and producing something, or whatever it is, the rut that I'm stuck in, or I can't do that because I have to do these other things.
Hmm.
What do you think has been the impact of you following? Was it calling you forth to go on the Camino, or
Yeah,
did you find
yes.
yourself it was?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So talk to us a little bit about what's come from that. Like, what do you think? You said all these things needed to change, but like, what has come from you following that and being called forth in that way?
Well, the Camino was kind of to me, it was, a little over 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks of being present, listening to my body.
Hmm.
And people don't talk about it a lot, but it was like I was pretty prepared and had done a lot. My partner was not quite as prepared, with listening to her body. And we all had believe me, it brings up your own triggers when you're on the Camino. And so my triggers were, are you listening to your body? Are you going to stop and take the time when you have to walk 15 miles today and you want to get there before they go into siesta, which I didn't really get, which is like 4 to 7:30, no food, impossible, no food. La comida, no food, impossible. Um, which is a big deal when you've been walking 15 miles every single day because you're
Right.
starving all the time.
Right.
Get enough food. And granola bars, protein bars just don't hack it anymore. Um, but anyways, it was such a listening to my body. Like, what does my body need? Does it need to stop and rest? Even though there's all these people flying by me, or it feels indulgent to stop. Like, you have to decide, how do you want to do the journey? And then do you want to go ahead and hurry up and get through your 15 miles and then enjoy the village where you're at? Or do you want to enjoy the journey each day? Um, is your left pinky toe hurting? Do you need to stop? Take off, unbuckle, and take off your backpack and take off your shoe, take off your sock, which sounds kind of silly, but this is like a 15-minute thing to check your left pinky toe, right? But if you don't, you'll create a blister. And then that will really impact your walk, right? And so it's worth it to go ahead and tape it up. And it was things like that that can seem small, like what we're talking about here. Like, that was a bit of a calling forth. It wasn't my left pinky toe, but it was like my second toe on my right foot, it was like, listen to it, right?
Hmm.
And attend to it. And then, like, you'll get the next message, right? And so there was so much about, is my body tired? Is it thirsty? Am I taking care of it? Um, when to push on, when to rest, when to just keep the pace. And so there was so many lessons there. That was a calling forth to walk, but the calling forth within the walk became, am I really listening to my body and giving it what it needs? And
Hmm.
that's a huge thing as I was celebrating this big birthday, going into my 60s, where everything is changing in your body. And so it's like, okay, listen, that deep listening. We keep circling
Hmm.
back to that and being willing to pay attention.
You said
And
something that really struck me, which you said all these people are whizzing by, you keep walking and you sit down and take your shoe off and your sock, etc. And I'm thinking like in my world, I'm on Zoom a lot, and it's like actually but I get caught up in the pace of it, and then get this done and get this done and do this and
right,
kids this, and it's like actually to sit down when the world is going by around you
yes,
to take care
yes.
of yourself.
And say, I'm going to walk outside in between my Zoom calls. I'm going to stay to the 45-minute mark or 50-minute mark, and it's worth it to go refill my water, do a little stretch break, keep the yoga mat handy, or, whatever those things are, because I call it naturing and nurturing. It's like, we've got to get it. I think that is being upped right now. Calling into, how can we get in nature? How can we nurture ourselves? And that the more we're called forth in other areas, the more we've got to do this. So the busier that we get on Zoom, the busier we need to get, taking care of ourselves.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
and I think it takes courage and it also takes real practice and being present to your point.
Yes, it does. It takes courage. It takes permission, like giving
Yeah.
yourself permission to do it differently than everybody else is doing. Um, I've been starting my Monday mornings, which I realize like Monday mornings have just been a lifelong, I was in corporate, like you hit the ground running in corporate, right? And have my own business. You got to like, I always had this pressure to hit the ground running on Mondays. And now I've started going to the ocean. It's like, what am I doing? But it's like filling up, aligning my energy, listening to those deep whispers does more for my efficiency, my productivity, my creativity than trying to hit the ground running right at my computer at 9 a.m. But
Mhm.
it requires permission because that's not the world that most of us have grown up in or what's honored right now, what's
Yeah.
held up right now.
Well, and I think also paying attention to the impact of it. I took my son to an island this past weekend off the coast of Georgia, and it's an environmental preserve. So all we did was things outside, and we went fishing. And I'm not a big fisher. I think this is the second time I've done it, but I got the allure, no pun intended, to this time because I was staring at one thing,
Mhm.
doing only one thing. I had to be fully focused on that one thing because I needed to see that line twitch.
Right.
The fish came and nibbled. And then around me was all this beautiful nature. And so afterwards, in it, I was sort of like, wow, this is great. But afterwards, I noticed how shifted I was, how
Yeah.
different I felt.
Yeah. That's how I was in the Camino. It was just, it was challenging in so many ways. And yet there was this like hardcore alignment inside, that of that presence and the beauty of just being right here, right now, and letting everything else go.
Yeah. And I think, like you say, it's like we have to pay attention to the calls and the signs, but then also what's the impact of paying attention? Because it's almost like it reinforces it.
Hmm.
If I had just left the fishing and was like, yeah, that was fun, that's fun, that's fun. It's like maybe I would have done it again, maybe I wouldn't, but now I'm like craving it because I'm like, oh, I remember how that made me feel. So again, it's presence to all parts of it, the during and the after, and wherever else
Yes.
we find ourselves.
Yeah, the fishing, the woodworking, the going to the ocean, my art journaling, it's you got to listen, going on a big walk or a small walk. Now I have a different view of my walk, I'm less likely to listen to the podcast now. I'm like, I just want to be with nature. And then noticing the impact that has on your body and how that actually supports you in whatever else is calling you forth.
Hmm. Why do you think, other than the I don't have time or just got too busy, why do you think we resist this?
Well, I think that we resist slowing down, right? Because a lot of it's slowing down. It's I think it's doing something against the system, the system we've been brought up in, which
Hmm.
says, if you're an entrepreneur, you need to be making money, which becomes like this 24/7 obsession, I've always got to be feeding the business, becomes this hungry bird that just can't be satisfied. Um, and same thing with our lives, we just everything, I just remember with my kids, my one regret is just we were so busy with their sports and tournaments and traveling and carpools and all the things that, you know, I wish even more, I did do some things around, being present, but like even more we're craving. I believe that I've noticed over my lifetime that there's always a rebound trend, right? So it's like as the busier we get, the more we're on Zoom, the more convenient it is to be 24/7 available, the more we need the rebound trend of mindfulness, of meditation, of the naturing, the nurturing. And so looking for and giving yourself permission for that, I think is huge because it's not what my dad is always like, how's your business? How's your business? Make any money? And he's not asking like, did you fill up your heart today? Were you present? And it's
Right,
totally different.
right, right. Well, and I want to open up for questions. So if anybody has any questions for Laura while she's here or any comments, please feel free to jump in. I think what you're saying is so important that is why we get that busy is like the way that, you know what I mean? Like the way that we get caught up in what we're taught. And so when I say, what do you think is the resistance? In many ways, I think it's unlearning these patterns.
Hmm.
And if we don't pay attention to the reinforcement of like, hey, this feels great, therefore I should do more of it, it's like you're really fighting against the system, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Our internal system and then the system that's been created around us.
Yes. Yeah. And so it can seem like it's you're doing the up like me going, Monday morning going to the ocean just seems so like, what are you doing?
Frivolous.
Society is just, it's not just outside people, but inside, it's like we've got these beliefs that are inside that say, no, I can't do that. Or that's not how the path to make more money or to get a new client kind of thing. And yet it's like changing it up because if nothing else, it's like it just makes me feel good. And it's like
Hmm.
giving yourself permission to do things, healthy things that make us feel good.
Yeah. And I guess, one of the last things I'd ask before we wrap up, because I know you've probably encountered folks who just are like, what do you mean, listen to the signs? Like, how do you guide people if somebody is really super busy and maybe not even really attuned to what they might be hearing without hearing it? How do you help people kind of get there?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a
It's
question.
something we talk about a lot, and so I reinforce it. And so I have one of the things I have them do is to make it tangible. And so they
Okay.
create a clue book, right? And so they actually create a journal and they write things, glue things, anything. They start training themselves to look for what makes their heart come alive or what colors just made them like, oh, that felt so good. Or, I love the look of that picture. I don't even understand what that picture is, but I'm going to print it out, put it in my clue book, you know? So part of it is like retraining our brain, which is our reticular activation system that says, I want to buy a red VW, and now we're seeing red VW bugs everywhere, right? That's what as soon as you start talking about it, you start seeing it everywhere. So it's like you have to retrain your brain to start looking for what lifts your energy, what makes you laugh, what makes you smile, what has your heart expand,
Hmm.
those types of things. And to have something physical that you capture them in, whether it's a list or you're doing photos or journaling, makes all the difference, right? It'll help you start recalibrating, which is what we need to do is to recalibrate.
I love that. That's helpful. Sorrell's got his hand up.
Good morning, Catherine. Laura, thank you for being here again.
Yeah, it's good to hear you, Sorrel.
I'm being challenged by this, Laura.
Hmm.
What you're speaking of is sending me to be really present to how I'm feeling in my body. Like
Mm.
I can sense that, yeah, this is feeling good, it's calling me forth, or this is not, and stay away from it. And what I'm being challenged by is how do I balance going with what's calling me now and an intention I have to accomplish something in the future?
Hmm. Yeah,
How do I
well,
balance the two? It's almost as if I'm saying, "Oh my God, I'm going to get sidetracked."
exactly, exactly. And so I think there is something about creating room for a third way, that we have this tendency to be like, I have to be all in on productivity, getting it done, or I'm going to go be present and mindful and go to the ocean and never come back, kind of thing. Or that's going to make me to want to take a nap and go to sleep, and then I'm never going to create anything. And to me, it's creating that third way that is, how do the two support each other? How does the two support each other where you going for a walk in nature actually lifts your energy? It actually allows the downloads to come in of this really great idea that then you can go be productive and you can write about or do your video or talk on the next daily huddle about, right? The two support each other. And I think that so often we think that they're at odds with each other. In fact, the third way is they support each other. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, I really got that.
Mm.
It's the third way.
Yeah, I love to play with the third way because it's so often we kind of have this, right brain thinking or when left brain thinking, and actually the two communicate together. So to me, that's that third way where they support each other. We need times where we get stuff done. We got to go out and do the things. And then there is times, giving ourselves that time, where we can soften, where we can be present, where we can be mindful because it makes us more fully, wholeheartedly a human being so we can do even better when we're productive.
Love that.
Yeah. And I think there's something I like to name it because when you name it like the third way, it breaks open the, oh, I'm here, I'm there, we're the tug of war.
Right. Right. I love that. Thank you. Thanks for the question, Sorrel.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and close us out today. And I just thank you so much, Laura, for coming and bringing this. It's really timely for me. And I think for all of us to really pay attention to what's in our heart. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Yeah. So I'll close on that note with love. Love using your full heart. Notice what's in your body and love yourself. And eat more plants, feed that body, get more rest, and laugh out loud. That'll help you to stress less. And you want to give of your strengths, of your love, of your gifts, of your resources, and move that body. As she says, let's go on more walks and be in nature and be more present. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today. Happy Tuesday.
Thanks, everybody.